Hello and good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Phil Walks and I'm an instructor of hospitality at the Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology. Today, with the help of a colleague of mine, EJ, we're here to make a video that relates to the opening of a bottle of wine. Wine service is something that can provide the extra special touch to romanticizing a guest experience in your restaurant. And my excitement level of doing this video is quite high, and I'm looking forward to showing you all the wonderful way that you can open wine and impress your guests at your restaurant. I'm going to start off by saying today we have a table of two for guests, and this is sometimes referred to as a two-top. On my two-top you will see a side plate, a dinner fork, a dinner knife, a folded napkin for the guest's use, a centerpiece, and then salt and pepper. Pretty straightforward. What will come later on will be the service of the wine itself and the steps it takes to open it properly. Wine has come a long way in the last 30 years. It goes from being something that was only containing a cork, having a capsule, and being opened by a waiter. But nowadays you'll see many varieties of wine service, and by that I mean how it is served and how it is provided to guests. In some locations you will see wine that is served from a box that is stored inside a plastic bag. In some locations you will see wine that is served from a tap, much like beer, but it's, instead of coming out of the tap line is being a lager or a pilsner, it happens to be a Merlot or a Chianti. Also, you will sometimes find wine in cans now, even you will see at the liquor store. Today's presentation, though, will be based around serving a bottle of wine, not with a cap or a twist cap, but with a cork. So what I will do is I will start off by asking you to take note of a few items that will be used during this opening. One, I'm going to start off by the most important capacity for opening a bottle of wine, which is called a server's friend, sometimes known as a corkscrew or simplified wine opener. You are going to find a number of different attachments on your server's friend that will assist you in the process of opening wine. You will have a serrated knife that allows you to provide a proper cut to the capsule or the foil that is on the bottle's neck. As well, you will see a helix. And the helix is the corkscrew itself, which will go into the cork to assist you with opening the wine. Last but not least, you're going to find two different levers that will allow you to provide the right leverage to pull the cork out of the bottle without breaking it. We would like to avoid breaking the cork, snapping it in half, because this is not only not ideal, but it might make you embarrassed or the guest feel a little less special. So I'm going to stop for the time being, and when you see me come in next, I will be bringing a bottle of wine and I will be going through the process of opening that wine, as well as explaining a few important capacities about the experience for not only you as the server, but for the guests most importantly. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome again back to the presentation on how to open a bottle of wine. My name is Phil Walks, as I stated before. It's my pleasure to be here with you. So as I stated in the introduction to what today's presentation was regarding, the next step that I was going to do was to inform you a little bit about the wine bottle itself, and then go through the process of opening that wine and doing a service to the level of standard that will match and if not exceed many restaurants around the hospitality industry. So I'm proud to say that I've got experience opening wine from working as a server, and my years of experience doing so, I've learned tips and tricks along the way that you pick up from working with exceptional servers in the industry, or having staff that just is dynamite that works for you. And I hope to share some of that with you, and you can take with it to your job, or maybe even just in your personal life if you like to drink wine at home. Today's sample wine, unfortunately not real wine. This is a filled bottle of Coppola with water. We've placed water in this bottle of wine for this exercise simply so that we can go through the process as if it were a full bottle of wine. Today's sample wine is a Cabernet Sauvignon from the United States. It's actually brought from a vineyard by the name of Francis Ford Coppola. and it is a Diamond Collection 2017 vintage. Wine labels have changed a lot over the years, and compared to what it were when wine started in the old world, which contained many pieces of information. Wine labels now have a different focus, and sometimes it is more based around the marketing that they do on the label than it is so much about meeting the important components to cover as it relates to particular region and the other items that are about the vineyard that made it itself. Francis Coppola Wine Vineyard is located in Napa Valley, California. I'm thankful that I've had the pleasure of visiting there. And this bottle of wine is actually quite tasty. So if you are interested in looking to try a good Cabernet, not to sell Mr. Coppola's wine, but this is something you might want to try. But for the purpose of today's presentation, I would like you to note that we have a label as well as a back label with a bit of a description, and it talks a little bit about alcohol content, the volume of the bottle, description of the wine itself, and maybe a little history. I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my reading glasses, so I can't get too deep into that. But on the front, let's focus on that. Here we have a logo that was designed for Mr. Coppola's wine brand, and then it states Francis Coppola, and underneath it is Diamond Collection. That's to state that it is a unique collection in which Mr. Coppola puts out different grape varietals that he rates as a higher. There's oftentimes a Vintner's Reserve variety. You'll see this nowadays, and it's sort of to show off and showcase some of what they believe are their higher quality wines. Cabernet Sauvignon is usually a deeper red wine, not to get too much into the subtleties of the taste, but more so to say that that needs to be mentioned, at least the name of the wine, when you're presenting it to the guests. And as well, 2017 is the year it was bottled, and it is called your vintage. So what I would like you to note is on the top you'll see I heated up and added a foil or a capsule. This is what we're going to cut to start the wine opening process. And after we've done that, I will insert the corkscrew or the helix to do the wine opening itself, or opening up the wine, and then the service will begin. So let me start by stating that when I would arrive to a guest's table, the two top that I happen to be serving, I've already came to visit these guests who I'd like you to envision are sitting at the table. I've served them some water, and I've come to realize that they're having red wine. And so I brought them 2 red wine glasses. As you can see, the red wine glass has a larger, more bulbous bowl, and that allows for the red wine to breathe. So this is the wine glass we're going to be serving it in today. When I would arrive to the table, presented over my arm, holding the wine in a professional manner, trying not to agitate. Agitation of a wine can possibly shake it up or create sediment issues, and this is something we want to avoid. It's considered a no-no, I guess, in wine opening. This is one of the reasons why when I'm explaining opening the wine itself and removing the cork, that we should never try to spin the wine around. We want to keep it still and settled because we are going to serve it, and we want it to be done in the manner so that it looks like it's professionally done, and that the label faces the host or the host's guests at all times, so they see the product that they've ordered, that they may be extremely proud that they've purchased and that they're getting to drink too. So I've come back to the table of 2, and I've brought over the bottle of wine, cradling it gently to show them that I'm holding this wine with respect to their order. And as I get to the table, I would state to the host, in this particular situation at the 2 top, I'm standing at the pivot point. The pivot point is the spot at the table which allows you to know whom is sitting at what seat number. The pivot point is often based by where it faces in the restaurant. And so what I mean by that is a server will stand at a spot that they're informed by the manager is the pivot point, and it allows expediters or runners to bring the food to the table and not have any confusion as to whom's order is belonging to whom. I'm going to start off by saying that the host is to my left at seat number 1, and being that there's only 2 seats, that would of course equate to this being seat number 2 as the guest of the host. I would walk up to the table with, of course, excitement and readiness to show off this wine to the guest and do the best presentation possible. Holding the wine cradled, possibly having one of your fingers inside the little butt on the bottom, which is called a punt, which is where sometimes you'll see servers or waiters or sommeliers, which is a wine expert. Sometimes you will see them hold that wine hold it from this particular spot when they are pouring it. I don't myself do that, but you will see this in the wine industry nowadays. I digress. Moving back to what we were about to do, which is I'm holding a towel over my arm, what some of you may think just looks like a napkin. Please envision this to be something a little more fancy. It might be monogrammed. It might say the restaurant's name on it, possibly even the wine's name on it, and it's called a lito. It's a French term to describe a service cloth that you utilize when doing wine pouring. So I'm coming back to the table and I'm going to intermittently stop to explain something, but I'm going to act as though I'm doing a service process to the guests at my two-top. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to begin the service now. Thank you. Hello, I'm back with your bottle of wine. Sir, I brought over the Francis Ford Coppola Diamond Collection Cabernet Sauvignon 2017. Is this the wine that you ordered today? Upon receiving affirmation from the host at the table that that is the wine that they've ordered, I would then go about in a polite and professional manner saying, would you mind if I open the wine for you now? And upon agreeance and upon approval, I would then go to the process of opening the wine. And as you can see, cradling, I'm holding it almost like I would cradle a baby, but not really. You know, babies are much more important. Looking at the bottle of wine, we've got Cabernet Sauvignon Francis Ford Coppola. I would then take the neck of the bottle of wine and I would hold it. And now I would have my left hand, because I am going to open the wine with my right, I would have my left hand not covering the label, just going from the neck down to about where the large part of the bottle opens up. Lito still around my arm. As a waiter and a prepared professional, I would have a server's friend or a corkscrew, which I explained to you in the earlier stages of the video. And at that point, I would then take my hand, I would utilize my fingers of the other hand, and I would get ready to do the process. As I explained, there's a number of different components. One of them that I would need to look to now would be the serrated knife that's at the end. In order to avoid spinning the bottle of wine, you would take this corkscrew and this knife, and I would start by going about halfway around in the direction that I already had it. Then I would turn the corkscrew the other direction in order to allow myself to avoid from having any issues as it related to shaking the bottle while I'm going through the service process. Now that I have cut the capsule appropriately, the foil piece that has been cut at the top before the lip of the bottle can now go into my server's apron. At that point, I will switch to the helix itself. When we are placing the helix into the corkscrew, we must do our best to get a centered insertion. And what I mean by that is, if we go in at an angle, it's much more likely we'll snap or break the cork. And we do not want to do that. So what I'm asking you to do is to try to achieve a centered puncture point, so that when you are turning the helix into the cork itself will not go at an angle which may cause us to have a corkage issue. So, a little tip that I once learned when I was serving is taking the first half circle of the helix itself and place it on the edge or the lip, and then push it into the center. At that point, I've now received a centered, as you can tell, it's pretty much going straight up. I've received a center insertion point. I would then, without shaking it, if I'm facing the guest, keeping the bottle's label facing the host, I would then twist the corkscrew till roughly to the point where I have only a little bit of the helix remaining out, so that we can go through the process of actually taking the cork out of the bottle. At this point, there is one ridge on your leverage tool, part of the tool, that you can utilize to take the cork just a tiny little bit out. At that point, you can use the one that's a little further away, which will allow you to go to a spot which gives you about 3/4 of the cork removed from the neck of the bottle. At this point, to avoid leaving the cork inside the helix and taking it out afterwards, for a more professional service, we would then take our corkscrew out. We would close it if we could. We'd either rest it on our apron like this, or just simply place it in the apron next to the other piece of foil that we've already put into there. And at that point, it should just gently come out of the cork without much noise at all. In spite of the fact that some people believe the sound of a pop is exciting and or part of the process, it is actually considered a bit, I don't want to say offside, but it's not etiquette for proper opening of wine. It should make more like a tss. You should only hear a small bit of sound, almost like a whisper. We don't want a big, because this is not a video for rock music where somebody's popping champagne. This is a professional service of red wine to a guest that is on maybe their honeymoon or a special event. It could be an anniversary. One could be proposing to the other. So we must treat this with a lot of respect. At this point, in the older days, now it's not so common now, you would then place the cork on the table in front of the host and allow them, if they were so inclined, to have a sniff of the cork. What this can do, I'll make this quick, is they can tell whether or not the wine is off. From that perspective, many guests don't do anything with it, and at that point, we can go about the service of wine. Would you like to sample the wine now, sir? At that point, of course, you'll receive a yes, and you will do your best to ensure that the label of the wine is always facing the host in this specific situation. And now when you're serving the other guest, you would also probably ensure that the label is facing that guest. And what that does is it shows you're respecting the fact that they've purchased a wine that they may be very proud to have ordered that day. The first pour of the wine is to do a 1 ounce pour approximately, so that the guests can have a sample to try it. At that point, we must be very mindful of what we're doing. We do not want to over pour, and we want to be careful. This is where our lito comes in handy. At that point, I would stand over here, and I would without invading the guest's space, I would then pour what equates to roughly 1 ounce. I would twist and I would wipe. What that does is it prevents you from dropping any red wine, rosé, whatever you're pouring for the guests onto the table, and it's part of a proper service. At that point, I stand back while the guest is going to sample the wine, and I cradle it with the label and the logo facing the guest, so that they can still see this wine they may be very proud of ordering. I wait a few seconds. Upon approval, how was the wine, sir? Oh, excellent. It's nice to hear. Would you mind if I poured for the other guest that is with you today? No? Okay, thank you. Upon that, you will carefully, without disrupting the space of the guest again, if you can, depending on the restaurant that you work for, you will then go over to the other side of the table. Pouring the next guest will depend upon how many next guests there are. In this particular case, because there's only 2 of them, I suggest pouring somewhere between 4 or 5 ounces, which is a traditional pour for when we're just doing a simplified wine service. A lot of wine portions that you can get in restaurants are 6 ounces, 5 ounces, 9 ounces, 10 ounces. It varies depending where you're going and what you'd like to order. But for this service, because of practicing the idea that you're just going to do a simplified service, and you may have other guests to pour to as well, which will should play factor in bearing in mind how much you pour. So if, for example, this bottle is 750 milliliters, which equates to roughly just under 26 ounces, and if you had 4 people that were sharing the wine, and you were accidentally pouring 7 ounces for each guest, all of a sudden you have no wine left, and then the bottle is empty. And that takes away from the experience. We want to be mindful of how many guests are at the table in terms of determining how much wine we pour. Would you mind if I poured you some wine now? Okay, thank you. At that point, I would take the wine, being careful not to allow the neck of the wine to touch the lip of the glass, twisting and going back to the host. May I provide you with the top up, sir? Thank you. Now, I've done the wine service and the wine has been poured, the guests are satisfied. At that, I would place the wine down and I would place it in a space, if I were serving a two-top, where both guests can get a look at the label itself, because that is, of course, as I stated earlier, part of the process. And it's a consideration to the guests that may have paid hundreds of dollars for a wine, that they consider something that they have as a treat or as monumentous, or just something that they want to be proud to have at their table. Now, moving forward at that point, if I was continuing the service itself, I would say, well, now that you have a little bit of wine and you've got your water, I've placed your appetizer order. If you don't mind, would you mind if I came back in a few minutes to take your dinner order? Okay, great, thank you. Do you have any questions about the menu or the specials that I spoke about earlier? No, wonderful. Okay, as I said earlier, you can find me around the restaurant. My name is Phil. If you need my attention, please don't hesitate to get my attention. Okay, at this point, I've done a service for some wine for 2 guests in a restaurant, and I've tried to do it as eloquently and as simplified for you to pick up on, because wine service should be fun, it should be enjoyable, it shouldn't be pressure, but at the same time we must treat it with courtesy and professionalism so that guests feel like their experience matters to us, and all components of their experience matters to us. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. A professional opening of a bottle of wine, as demonstrated by Phil Walks. I'm so pleased to have had this chance to show you the ropes on opening wine and what you can do to assist in not only making the experience of a guest at a restaurant and the restaurant you work for that much more amazing, but also to feel the confidence and comfort that you know you can do this even when under pressure. Some of the key points I want you to take from this are, again, we have components of a wine, opener or corkscrew or server's friend. We have a serrated knife that allows you to cut the foil, also known as capsule. We have the helix or the corkscrew itself, which you insert into the cork, which allows for you to remove the cork from the neck, which is here. We have a number of different levers. These levers allow for you to do different phases of removing the cork from the bottle. This is stored in your server's apron. What I have in the back of my apron, what appears to be like a napkin, is, as I stated before, a lito. This is allowing you to prevent from any spills onto the table. The bottle itself, the key components that I would like you to remember to review with the guests when you come to the table are, you make sure that you mention the bottler or the winemakers themselves. You mention the grape varietal and specifically if there's a name to the wine, like the collection. And then you can mention as well the area in which the wine comes from. So what part of the world. This particular wine is from the United States, which is considered part of the New World. Old World is any countries that produce wine in the continent of Europe, and all New World wines are anything that you would see in Oceania, or so in Australia and New Zealand, parts of South America, so for example Chile or Argentina, our own country, Canada, the United States, And then, of course, there's a budding wine growing community in the southern tip of Africa, in South Africa too. I may have missed or not mentioned a few, so please forgive me if I have done so. The other components that I need you to remember are avoiding, when you're pouring the wine, avoiding touching the neck of the wine with the glass itself. The initial pour is 1 ounce. The follow-up pour will be based around how many guests you have, in order to not pour the entire bottle out on the first service. That being because guests should get to see the bottle they've purchased at the table for a little while, rather than having it being completely emptied and then taken away. The only time there's a variance to that is if the guests, specifically the host at the table, asks you to just pour it out and bring another wine. At that point you would just do so, because the guest request is the most important at that situation. We start by doing the introduction to the guests themselves, specifically the host. Never agitate the wine. Always do your best to have the label facing the host or the guest that you're pouring for, because this allows for you to show the brand that you're providing to the guests and as part of their experience. Most significantly is to be mindful that it's about what the guests enjoy and how they experience your capabilities as a server and as a wine opener in this situation. Last but not least, when we have completed the pour, we will place the bottle of wine onto the table for the guests to view. We will do our final closing before we leave, and then at that point, the service of the wine at that moment has come to a conclusion until later on. Another piece of advice: when you do come back to the table, it's important for you as a server or as a waiter to feel comfortable pouring the wine for the guests, to prevent them from pouring it themselves. It's another step to show them exceptional service, that you are excited to have them in your section, in your little mini restaurant that you run in that particular place that you work. I don't really have anything further. Again, I apologize if I've missed some small points. Every person and every waiter does things differently. Every manager has different expectations. The most important thing is that we focus on the guests, their experience, and trying to do a spectacular and professional wine opening for all guests moving forward. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this.